Okay, so we have the power rule, which is 4.1. You want to use the power rule when you have a linear, quadratic, cubic, or quartic equation.
You use the power rule whenever you are trying to find the derivative of any of the equations. So f of x equals ax to the power of n is its most simplest form. Then to find the derivative of this equation, you will multiply n to a, and then you'll subtract 1 from n, and that is the power rule. And then we will show a few examples. So the first example we have for the power rule is f of x equals 5x to the 4th plus 3x cubed minus 5. So with the power rule, you take the power and then you multiply it by its coefficient. So 4 times 5 is 20. And then after you multiply it, you subtract your exponent. So it'd be 20x to the 3rd plus, same thing with this one, you take it and you multiply it. So it'd be plus 9x, and then don't forget to subtract it. Okay. And then our 5 is considered a constant, and when you take a prime of a constant, it turns into 0. So you can either leave it blank, or if you really want to, you can add a plus 0 onto it. So now that you've taken, you've primed the f of x, it will now turn into f prime of x, and this is your answer.
Alright, for our next example, we have 1 over x plus 1 over x raised to the 5th, which you can rewrite that as x to the negative 1 plus x to the negative 5th. And then just like our first example, you're going to bring down this number to the front, so it's going to be negative x raised to the negative 2 plus, bring down that negative 5, negative 5x raised to the negative 6. To bring this back to simplified form, you're going to write it as f prime of x equals negative 1 over x squared minus 5 over x raised to the 6.
f of x equals negative 1 over 2x to the 0.2 power. So this can also be written as negative 1/2 x to the negative 0.2 power. So what you would do is you would take negative 0.2 and multiply that by negative 1/2, and you would get 0.1 x, and then you would subtract 1 from 0.2, and you'd be left with negative 1.2. And then to get that into a simplified fraction form, you would be left with f prime of x equals 0.1 over x to the 1.2 power. So for this problem, which is our final example, we have f of x equals the square root of x minus 1 over the square root of x. You would then write this in another form as x to the 1/2 minus x to the negative 1/2 power. And it's negative 1/2 because the x is in the denominator of the fraction. So to take the derivative of this equation, you take 1/2 and bring it out front, and you'd get 1/2 x, and then you would subtract 1 from 1/2 to get negative 1/2 there. And then you would take this power of negative 1/2, and since you already have a negative out front, it becomes a positive. So you'd have a plus 1/2, and then you'd subtract another 1 from negative 1/2, which would leave you with negative 3/2. And then to write this in a simplified form as a fractions, you would be left with f prime of x equals 1 over 2 square root of x plus 1 over 2 square root of x cubed, because the 3 comes from the top of the fraction. And this is your